Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to talk to you about a recent ban which has been introduced in China on smoking in public places and talk about how effective I think that ban is likely to be. So I'll start. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been working as an interpreter for over 30 years now, and often younger colleagues ask me what the biggest differences are between our working environment today and our working environment back at the end of the 1970s. And one example which I invariably quote is the attitude to smoking. Today, of course, no one is allowed to smoke in any of our buildings. But in those days, colleagues, interpreters, smoked not just in the buildings, they actually smoked in the booths. And I remember there were occasions where you would look across the room and actually have great difficulty in working out who was in the Greek booth or who was in the Danish booth because there was such a thick pall of smoke. Now, fortunately, things have moved on. Fortunately for our health, that is, because there is one group of people who think that this is a very bad development. And I refer, of course, to the major tobacco manufacturers. Basically, over the years, as increasingly stringent legislation has been introduced in the European Union, the United States, and the other most developed countries in the world, the tobacco producers have had no choice but to spread to other countries where the degree of regulation has often been limited, if not entirely non-existent. And obviously, the most attractive market of all has been China, the country with the world's biggest population. I think it was about 1.3 billion the last time somebody looked. It is a real gold mine as far as the tobacco companies are concerned. More than half of men smoke, and according to a recent study, a quarter of Chinese were totally unaware of the fact that smoking could represent any sort of health risk whatsoever, either to the smokers or to those in their immediate environment. And all of this has then been a recipe for massive profits for the tobacco producers, but also a very useful source of revenue through the tax bill for the Chinese government. And I read somewhere, although I must admit I have some difficulty in believing this, that 10% of all revenue to the Chinese government was made up of tax on tobacco products. So last year, when a ban was introduced on smoking in public places, many people hailed this as a historic change. And obviously it's something to be welcomed. But from what I've read about this, I'm not entirely convinced that this is a change which will fully revolutionize life in China. And I say this for a number of reasons which I'd like to run through quite quickly. First of all, in China, there is a total lack of any sort of anti-smoking culture. As I said before, a quarter of people are blissfully unaware of the fact that smoking represents any sort of risk whatsoever. And in any event, where there have been bans in the past, for example, there's been a ban on smoking in hospitals, not unreasonably, these bans have largely been totally ignored. In fact, I'm told that if you go into a hospital waiting room, they're usually not just ashtrays, but even complimentary cigarettes lying around for people to light up. A second reason why I think the impact will probably be fairly limited is that its scope is itself rather limited. It applies to places such as restaurants and cinemas, which is all fine and good, but will not involve public offices. And of course, offices, for better or for worse, are where we spend the majority of our waking hours. And then there's a third reason, which I think is by far the most important reason why I don't think the change will be as significant as many have suggested, And that is the fact that the law as it has been so far has basically not been enforced at all. There are rules on enforcement. There are obligations on the owners of restaurants and cafes, say. They have to put up a conspicuous sign telling people they're not allowed to smoke. They have to designate a member of staff who will have particular responsibility for drawing smokers' attention to that sign and to the ban. Not, I would imagine, a particularly popular post for anyone to get. And they have been asked to promote a no-smoking culture, though I don't think anyone really has any idea what that means. And if that doesn't sound vague enough as it is, it's also worth pointing out that if restaurant owners, say, fail to apply these new rules, nothing will happen to them. There are no penalties, no fines, not for the owners and not for the individual smokers either. Now, to conclude, I don't want to sound unduly negative. It is a start, but will this represent a great leap forward? I don't think so. Thank you very much.